It's always basketball season. Welcome, friends. This is a live edition of Syracuse Sports. My name is Brent Axe. Joining me is Syracuse basketball beat reporter Mike Waters, as we've got a very big fish out of the recruiting pond that the Syracuse coaching staff pulled out tonight to discuss, among some other offseason topics that we will catch you up on. But the main purpose for us appearing on your screens now is that Sadiq White, who is a top 25, top 30 prospect, no matter what recruiting service you look in, you're not going to get much past 30. He is a composite 5-star recruit, 6'8", from Charlotte, North Carolina, and a very coveted prospect by the Syracuse basketball coaching staff, verbally committed to Syracuse tonight. It's the first commitment for the class of 2025, and it is a big one. So we are going to talk about that. We're going to catch up on some offseason news and notes, the Eddie Lampkin saga, which has come to a conclusion, and where Syracuse goes next here, including the son of a player who, by the way, turned 40 years old today. Happy birthday, Carmelo Anthony. How about that, Mike? Melo's 40. He's
That's
getting
not
old.
possible, Brent.
Yes, it is.
No, because if he was 40, that means I'm older.
Fill in the blank.
No,
exactly.
No.
So a few more gray hairs just went in as we said that. Kion Anthony, by the way, Mike, on Instagram a short time ago, on his Instagram story, posted the card, if you will, of Sadiq White committing to Syracuse, sharing that to his various followers in the Instagram space. So very notable there. But Mike, let's start with Sadiq White. He was the guy, top of the list, high priority. He's the player that this coaching staff wanted in the class of 2025. Putting aside the obvious, that he's a phenomenal talent, and we'll discuss that and go over all the measurables and everything here. Why was he the guy for Adrian Autry and company in the class of 2025?
I think there were several reasons, Brent. For one, they had targeted him early on. He was extended an offer over a year ago. So in April of his sophomore year of high school, they're offering him a scholarship. And I think they made it a priority and felt like he was a guy that they were in on early, that they were ahead of the game on, and they made all sorts of efforts to stay ahead, I think all along they thought this guy could be the first domino. And when you have that one player out there that you think, all right, we think he's going to make up his mind early. We think he's going to commit. And if you think you can get him, then you make him that priority, because then you're hoping the other ducks all fall into the row, right? That the other dominoes fall. But until that first one falls, sometimes you can get a little stuck in recruiting, and you're waiting. But now this was an important one because I think it also sends a message, or maybe continues a message that Donovan Freeman sent out last year, that you can be a big time recruit and go to Syracuse again. Because, to look at it this way, like if Sadiq White makes the McDonald's All-American game next year, and looking at his rankings, that's very conceivable right now. I mean, he's, as you said, a consensus top 30 guy and kind of has a bullet. He's headed upwards. And just recently was one of the 18 finalists for the USA National 18 and under team. He didn't make the final 12, I don't think, but still, when you're in the 18,
it's pretty good.
If he makes that McDonald's game next year, it's going to be the first time Syracuse has had players in the McDonald's game in back-to-back years since 2011 and 2012. In 2011, it was Rakeem Christmas and Michael Carter-Williams. And the next year after that, it was Dajuan Coleman.
That's pretty refreshing to hear if you're a Syracuse fan, because, look, we're in the transfer portal era. We're in the NIL era. There are so many conversations we have, Mike, that the game has changed. But good old-fashioned recruiting is still important. This is refreshing to have this conversation. You're talking about a good old-fashioned recruit who played high school basketball and, of course, went through you mentioned Team USA tryouts, the AAU circuit, and everything that builds up these top prospects these days. But you still have to recruit. And there's nothing like the energy of landing a McDonald's All-American level recruit to get a fan base riled up. And Mike, you just said it. You had Donovan Freeman, who was the highest rated recruit since the now 40-year-old Carmelo Anthony. And again, happy birthday to him. Elijah Moore. It's the last time I say that, I promise. Elijah Moore, who is a top 100 player, a real sharpshooter from three-point range. I've been hearing, as you have as well, Mike, some great things and seeing some great things about Elijah and what he's been doing on the AAU circuit. Now you add Sadiq White to that list. That is legit. And you're seeing some of it reminds me of kind of what the football guys were saying, like, wow, look at Syracuse. They're back on the map. Nothing says you're back in the recruiting wars that you can convince these type of players to commit to Syracuse, and nothing recruits like recruits. So now that you can point to some other players and say, oh, hey, do you want to join these fellas here that are coming who are all highly rated guys? Oh, do you know we had back-to-back McDonald's All-Americans? It sells itself. And that's where Autry had to get back to, and to do it in year 2 on the job as the head coach. I mean, all that other stuff I mentioned is important, and you have to deal with it. But good old-fashioned recruiting is still at the center and heart of what you do.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brent. And you're right. It is a new era now in college athletics, and NIL has an impact. And sometimes some recruits, money may trump all, and you just go to the highest bidder. But when Sadiq White was talking about his commitment and his recruitment, he kept going back to the relationships. He said the relationship was important to him. And he would mention Coach Autry, and he mentioned Brendan Strawn as well. 2 coaches who he said he talks to a lot, he talks to all the time. They talk not just about basketball stuff, but when they do talk basketball, and you mentioned this in particular, they don't just blow wind up his skirt. It's like they talk about what his game needs to develop. Areas of his games that needs work, and that's what he wants. He wants to develop into a better player. And some kids, they appreciate that honesty. Yes, you're a really, really good high school player right now, but if you want to go where you end up want to be, how do you get to the NBA? Well, we're going to work with you on this, this, and this. And so, that's recruiting. That's the old school type recruiting. And Red Autry and his staff now, just barely into year 2. They've just wrapped up 1 full calendar year. They're showing again in this recruiting cycle that they can recruit.
And I was going to say that stuff still matters. It might matter more. I have been struck by a number of players, and these are the type of players you're looking for. They're still out there that do work hard, that appreciate coaching, that want to get better. All those things are there. The money, the path to the NBA, all those things that Syracuse, being in a major now power in basketball, there's a few more on the list, right? But essentially a Power 4 conference, if you go by the traditional measurements of football, they're like all that stuff exists. 35,000 people at the peak Carrier Dome. I said Carrier Dome, JMA Wireless Dome games, all that's there. Awesome. But I have been struck by how many young 17, 18, 19-year-old players in all sorts of sports. I want to be coached. Work me hard. Don't promise me a job. Now, there are some out there that are like, yep, I want A, B, C, and D. I just saw a recent interview with Stephon Marbury when he was getting recruited by Jim Boeheim. And basically Boeheim went in that living room and said, I'm not going to start you. You've got to earn it. And that was it. He's like, no, I'm out, going to Georgia Tech. Right. So you got to balance that out.
Yeah. And since you brought that up, can we set the record straight on what Stephon said? A lot of people have construed that as Boeheim told him he's not going to start. That's not what Boeheim ever says to any player.
He says you got to earn it. Yeah.
He said he wouldn't guarantee. He doesn't guarantee. He would never guarantee a player that he would start right away. He said you would earn it. You would have an opportunity. Stephon, I don't know what Stephon heard or what he thinks now. And I know maybe Stephon, if he wants to call me and say, no, Boeheim said I wasn't going to start. Listen, Boeheim did not say Stephon was not going to start. He said you'll earn it like everybody else. Now, listen. Right. A guy like Stephon Marbury coming in out of high school also should know he's going to start.
Exactly.
He's going to earn it.
Semantics. It's like, kid, you're going to start. But just let me give you the pitch here, right? But that's the thing. You've got to navigate those waters as a coach. Maybe you meet a kid and you're like, you know what? We've got to kind of tell him he is going to start. But what players appreciate is that, and Mike, you said it, the relationship's genuine. You talk to these kids all the time. They get to know you, even through text messages and other means. Like Fran Brown had a lot of success with this in football recruiting. Kids that, keeping it real, as they like to say. And it feels like that message got through to Sadiq White, who, by the way, picked Syracuse. His final list was down to LSU, Alabama, Tennessee, Texas, Georgetown, and USC. It's interesting, Mike. He's from Charlotte. I didn't hear Duke or North Carolina on that list. It feels like, and you're going to get an opportunity to talk to him here, knock on wood, coming up this evening, we hope. I'm curious why they weren't on the radar. Just feels like a situation he just probably wanted to go somewhere else, which is, we talk about that with players around here. Why didn't Greg Paulus go to Syracuse? And why didn't Brianna Stewart go to Syracuse? Like, some kids just want to get away and go to a different opportunity, right?
Some do. We also don't know on the flip side, are Duke and Carolina looking at kids that are ranked first in the class or second in the class? Maybe they have an in and they didn't do, they didn't pursue him as hard. And so therefore they don't make it to the final list because he knew maybe he wasn't their number one priority. I don't know. I can't wait to talk to him about that. You mentioned Duke and Carolina. I'm worried to NC State, another in-state school. A lot of times will recruit that area. So, that was interesting. And you know what? Maybe this is another good thing on the Syracuse coaching staff. This kid was ready to commit early. He didn't want it to drag on, and they were in early. And if it turns out like maybe if Carolina or Duke were dragging their feet a little bit, Syracuse was able to take advantage of that. It was an opportunity.
It's a good reminder of the process that recruiting is. You got to get in line early, and then you got to stick with it and build that relationship. Text after games. Know when people's birthdays are. Know certain details. Just stick with it. Stick with it, because it comes down to that, as Sadiq White did tonight, turns on a YouTube live similar to the one we're on right now and makes that decision. And one of the first things you hear out of the mouths of these players often is, man, they were there from day one, the relationships and how important they were. And you have a coaching staff, Mike, that's gone under transition. You got Brendan Strawn, who Sadiq White did call out on his live stream, Coach B, as he called him, right? He's known for his recruiting prowess. You've got a new coach that Syracuse brought in that you had the opportunity to talk to on your podcast, right? From Mount St. Mary's, same thing, recruiting, relationships. Mm-hmm. You're covering certain areas of the country. That's a huge get, but it ultimately comes down to the head coach and what the head coach is doing. The assistants put in the grunt work. The head coach takes maybe more of the credit than he deserves sometimes, but all these coaches maintain that relationship. And as we mentioned, now you got three big scorers. If you go back to Donnie Freeman and Elijah Moore from last year, there's momentum. And now the next time Autry makes a phone call, walks in a gym, contacts a player, there's just more credibility behind that. Not that he didn't have it before, but there's a feel and there's momentum there. And it's really amazing to see, and Mike, it's May 29th, which goes to tell you the other thing I was thinking about is you just don't know when these things drop out of the sky. Like we heard earlier this week, Sadiq White, Wednesday, that's what I'm going to announce. Like that can happen. A kid could just wake up one day, knows where he's going, wants to end the process, wants to free up his senior year just to focus on playing the game, get ready, here it comes. And that was the case with him.
Well, and now he gets to continue the rest of this summer on the AAU circuit. And this is his last AAU summer. So a lot of guys, they're starting to want to end the recruiting cycle now so that they can just focus on their AAU team and the Peach Jam or the EYBL, championship or Adidas or whatever circuit you're on. But now you talked about the recruiting, talk about Red Autry and his staff, especially with Red Autry, being a newer head coach. And now his staff has changed over quite a bit now. Brendan Strawn's younger and new, and Dan Engelstad is brand new to the staff. And Alan Griffin is now like the senior guy in terms of the assistant coaches. But, now when you're Red Autry and the rest of your staff, you walk into a gym for the rest of this summer. It's like, oh, hey, there's Syracuse. Oh, and, they're watching Sadiq White. They got Sadiq White, and that plays, people understand that, recruits, coaches, everybody knows that. And, it just makes it a little bit easier to walk in the gym. And, as you continue to recruit kids, not just in the class of 25, but they're already on to kids in the class of 26, and they're evaluating class 27, 28 kids this summer. It just kind of gives you a little bit of momentum and maybe a leg up on the calendar. But the momentum in recruiting is an absolutely real thing. I'll swear by that.
So as we tend to do in this game, Mike, we say who's next, right? Because that's the first commitment for the class of 2025. Following up on what you just said, though, momentum can be key in these things. One can spawn another. I mentioned Kion Anthony, saw it, posted it on his Instagram. He's the guy everybody's wondering about here. What we last knew with Anthony was he was planning to announce before the season starts, I think September, October timeframe, but that can change. I just said it. He could wake up tomorrow and be like, nope, Sadiq's there. I'm playing with him. Giddy up. Let's go. Right.
Yep.
But let's take a step back here, Mike, and just say, okay, we know the name. What kind of player are we looking at here? And putting all the family connections aside, how does he fit Syracuse? And do you think Syracuse is the running favorite at this point?
I think Kion Anthony's a fit just about anywhere he chooses to go, but certainly he fits in with what Syracuse is trying to become under Red Autry. I think he fits anywhere because he's a guy who doesn't necessarily have to have the ball all the time. He's a shooter. I think in today's game, with the emphasis on 3-point shooting, a shooter's valuable. And so anybody's going to want to take a guy who's got good height, 6'5", maybe 6'6", and can shoot the ball the way Kion does. He has a feel for the game, an understanding for the game. You would think that would be the case, with his dad being Carmelo, but he really does. He displays an understanding of the game. He's getting better from what I can see too. So he fits. He fits what Syracuse has been trying to do. They like versatile guys. They want guys who are going to get after it. They want winning guys. And I think also if you saw, last year's team, which wasn't one that Red Autry was able to put together after taking the job. Most of the team was already there, and they had some shortcomings when it came to 3-point shooting outside of Chris Bell. So, but since then you see like who they're bringing in. You mentioned Elijah Moore, Donnie Freeman, for a kid his height, can shoot. Sadiq White is a very versatile player. I wouldn't describe him as just a shooter, but he's more explosive athlete, but can get to the basket and smooth. And, but Kion Anthony now, there's your shooter, and if you kind of look at the roster and way things are moving around, if next year turns out to be Chris Bell's last year in a Syracuse uniform, Kion Anthony comes in the year following as a freshman, fits right into that big guard, small forward mold.
Quickly on him, Mike, do you think he moves up to the top of the list now? This was like Mel Kiper Jr.'s big board. Now Sadiq White's off it. Anthony would seem to be a 1A to his 1, but would seem to be the top priority now that Sadiq White's off the board.
Yeah, I don't know if all the time you have like one guy who's the absolute priority. Maybe you do in some classes where he's just an absolute must and maybe a position of need. I think Sadiq White was obviously one they had put a lot of emphasis on, but I think you had priorities with Sadiq and you had a priority with Kion, and I think you got a couple kids, maybe 2 or 3 names that we can discuss in the backcourt at the point guard or combo guards. Because if you look at who they've offered and who they seem to still be working on, it seems like they are intent on making sure they bring in a kid who can play the 1 or maybe combo 1 and 2. And then with Kion and a couple other guys that are Kion size, they're looking for a guy here. And Sadiq was definitely, they might have had some other guys that look like Sadiq, maybe the same size and stuff. And it will be interesting to see whether they back off some of those guys or if they think there's just enough difference where maybe you have a chance where they can both be on the floor together. We'll see where they go. But I think this was a year where it's like, we have a priority here and a priority here and a priority here.
Good problems to have all around for sure. A couple other names, Mike. I mean, Syracuse is going to be out there at these tournaments and they're recruiting a bunch of players. Speaking of which, at a recent tournament, 3 Syracuse coaches watched Sadiq White play, had that presence, and that could all pay off in the end here. Give me a few other names. And Mike wrote a story about this, guys, that you can check out on syracuse.com. There's some recruits that Syracuse is going to be tracking throughout the summer. But we mentioned Anthony. Who are a few other names that early pop here and you think will get more attention now that Sadiq White is committed?
Well, I mentioned that they were looking at some guards, and those guards include Tyler Jackson, 6'1" kid. He plays with Overtime Elite in the AAU circuit. I believe he's going to be playing on Team Mello with Kion Anthony.
There you go.
So they'll be together all summer. Maybe they can have some talks, some long walks, long talks. Hey, college. Another recruit that got an offer a little bit more recently than Tyler Jackson was a Caden Lewis, a kid out of the Washington, D.C. area, goes to Sidwell Friends High School, another 6'2" point guard type kid. Both of them are top 100 recruits across the board. Where they are exactly depends on which service you really want to look at. But, a Caden Lewis would be very interesting. Of course, Syracuse has recruited that D.C. area really well for a long, long time. So just depends on how old you are with what recruit you want to start with, Brent. Do you want to go back to Dave Bing? Go right ahead. You want to move into the 70s or 80s? You can do that too. A lot of DC guys over the years. Lawrence, I'm a Lawrence Moten guy, so we can talk about Lawrence from the DC area. But then there's your Jeremy Grant fans, or even more recent Judah Mintz. So DC area,
every guys, generation covered.
Yes, another DC area kid. Maybe not a pure point, but definitely a combo backcourt guy would be Derek Dixon at a Gonzaga High School in DC, 6'3". God, who are some of the other guards? Oh, Dante Allen, a very recent guy that's kind of popped on the board. A kid out of Florida, Miami, Florida, another top 100 recruit. And, he's interesting because he's the son of former Villanova player Malik Allen. So another guy with a legacy, another pedigree. So, so they're definitely looking at that in the backcourt there. So it'll be interesting to see some of those guys. And, I don't know if it's hey, whoever takes the offer first sort of situation, or if I don't know if, they might have one or two of these guys targeted above the others. I really don't know. I don't have that one all sussed out yet. But with that many guys, either at point guard or smaller combo guards, it tells me something. I'm going to do my Brian Windhorst thing here. Why would they be?
Now, why is that?
Why are they recruiting points?
And for the record, you just made us feel older with that reference to Malik. So I just wanted that on the record, that it's not just me making us feel a little older tonight with sons of players that we covered and watched now on the recruiting radars here. In other news, Mike, it's been an active past couple of weeks.
Another guard.
One more.
You know what? I don't want to leave this kid out because know what? Even if this kid doesn't even go with Syracuse, this kid's good. He's a little bit underrated, I think. He's not under the radar because people really do know about him. But Keyshawn Tillery, a kid out of the Albany area, plays for the Albany City Rocks. You always got to watch out for City Rock kids. They're almost always better than their rankings. And the City Rocks right now, he's their highest rated player, and he's just outside the top 100. And the City Rocks right now, I think last week, they went 11-4. They went 11-4 with nobody ranked in the top 100. And Keyshawn played great. And I'm hearing from a lot of people that he's playing really well. He's kicking some butt out there. So even if Syracuse doesn't ramp up their efforts for him, still, it's a guy that folks might want to keep an eye out on because he's going to end up somewhere. He's an up-and-comer.
So that's somewhere down the rainbow in the future of Syracuse basketball. In the immediate future, this upcoming season, let's retrace our steps a little bit here. So recently, both Mike and I, citing sources, wrote this story about Eddie Lampkin. Okay, Eddie Lampkin, the transfer from Colorado, comes in pretty early in the transfer portal cycle, commits to Syracuse, puts out everything. They kind of have that cycle now where they commit, and once they dot I's and cross the T's that they need to, they put out the graphic. He's committed in the whole thing. Syracuse also bringing in Jair Davis from Delaware and Jacon Carlos from Hofstra out of the portal. So they were active in the portal. Eddie Lampkin, though, was certainly one of the highest rated centers in the portal. He was a big need for Syracuse, particularly after he committed. You saw a number of players at that position. Peter Carey ends up at Siena. William Patterson goes into the portal. Monir Hema moves on. Naheem McLeod coming back from an injury. You needed not only a center, but an impact center, right? 6'11", 265, great passer. We've seen the highlights. So about a week and a half ago, Eddie clears his Instagram, right? And it had a lot of people wondering what was going on because all Syracuse references were cleared of that. So we're getting asked about this every single day.
And fans being fans, they took that with total calm.
Total 2024 moment there. Yeah, everybody was fine about that. It's not like we were getting texts and calls and every form of communication every day on the hour about that. Not at all. Everybody's like, no, that's fine. Nothing to see here, right? Animal House, nothing to see here. So, of course, after a while, we had to look into this, and we did. And to make a long story short, basically, Eddie came in to reaffirm his commitment to Syracuse, to have a conversation with the coaches and just be like, what's going on here? There were other schools that were in contact with him. Remember, in the portal, you're still in the portal in a way. It's almost like recruiting. You're verbally committed until you are enrolled, you are there, right? There are other schools that are just going to kind of float by and be like, hey, just in case we're offering this, they're offering that. We still got a few months here. Do you want to come here? Right? So Eddie comes to Syracuse, meets with the coaches. Then we see some social media posts. He's buying stuff on Marshall Street. He talked to our colleague, Donna DeToda, said, nope, I'm committed. Nothing has changed. So that draft you felt was the sigh of relief coming from Syracuse basketball fans because, Mike, Eddie had some leverage in this conversation. Let's face it, that is a position of need for Syracuse, and had they lost him by some means in the portal, what you have left now on May 29th, let's just say they're not on the level of the player you got in early April when Eddie Lampkin committed. So a little bit of drama there, and it happens. We're in this new world of NIL and the portal and what happens there, but all seems to be well, and Syracuse is going to have an impact center on the roster coming up next season.
And I agree that he seems to be firmly in the fold at this point. Everyone's going to, forget that 10-day period of unknown frenzy. But I tell you what, I think he is just as crucial now as he was at the time when he first committed. You're talking about a 6'10", 6'11" kid who goes about 260 pounds. And actually, I think he looks better in some of the workout videos I've seen lately than he did at Colorado back in the season. Like, he's slimmed down. It looks like he's fully intent on having a really good year. And knows a lot is expected of him, but they wanted to get more of a low post presence out of their center. Malik Brown, listen, he did a heck of a job last season. Basically played out of position. He's a 6'8", 6'9" power forward, and he had to play center after all the injuries and everything happened to Naheem and others. And, he did a great job, but he wasn't a low post scorer, a guy you could dump the ball inside to and force other teams to either, double team him or just have him, back his way in for an easy bucket. And Eddie Lampkin is that kind of low post guy. You're going to dump the ball into him. But the neat thing about Eddie Lampkin is while he can score in the post, he's also a very willing and adept passer. He averaged over 2 assists a game last year. And I know that doesn't sound a lot to people because we usually don't talk about centers and assists, but I think I only found 2 Syracuse centers in the last 40 years that had averaged that many assists in a game. And it's like Danny Shays and Derek Coleman. And, Derek was actually a power forward who 1 year had to start at center, and that was the year he averaged that. So,
yeah.
Think about guys like Chris Bell, Donovan Freeman, and now they're out at the three-point line. Elijah Moore out at the three-point line. And their man sloughs off to help out when Eddie gets the ball in the post. And Eddie looks out and passes that ball. And it's that kick out pass from the low post that three-point shooters thrive on because they're already looking at the basket. They're squared up. The ball is coming from that way. You think about all the practice sessions three-point shooters do. And a lot of times it's like, especially if they're using that machine with the under the basket that delivers the ball back out. I think they call it the gun. Well, it shoots the ball directly out from the basket back out to them. They're looking at the basket. This is what they practice on their own over and over again.
Great point.
That's the play they want. They want that ball being kicked out from the paint back out to them. And can you imagine what Chris Bell could do if he actually had more open threes? Because he shot a lot of contested threes last year. So,
which he got better at as the season went along, and he got better at moving and finding his spot. 40%. But the guy is a catch and shoot guy, and he's great at it. So, yeah, they're licking their chops at that prospect. They could conceivably, and I think they will in a lot of ways, run the offense through Eddie Lampkin last year because you said it. If he gets the ball in the post, you have to defend him. You have to commit to that, and you have to double team him whenever you can. And that's just going to leave a lot of possibilities open on the offense. So,
I mean, guys like J.J. Starling, Elijah Moore, Chris Bell, Donovan Freeman, if they're able to get shots without working for that shot, all because the ball got inside to Eddie Lampkin first, and you draw that double team, that's just a gravy. I mean, that makes an offense so much easier. And remember last year, even when things were going good for Syracuse in a game, there were in the half court, though, it always seemed like they were working for their points. It was Judah Mintz having to, get by a guy, get a shoulder, go in, draw fouls. It was always hard in the half court, even when things were flowing. And if they had a game where they scored more than 80, 85, it's because they were getting steals and getting fast breaks. But they had to work in the half court, and they were successful a lot because guys like Judah Mintz and J.J. Sharling were really, really good. But it might be kind of interesting to watch them not have to grind as much.
Mike, a couple things here before we let you go and let you get back to work here. Just to reiterate, by the way, this is a recent Mike's mailbox question, but just to kind of refresh everybody's memory. There are 10 scholarships committed for this upcoming season, now that we know Eddie Lampkin's back in the fold. And I'll just reiterate the names quickly. J.J. Starling, Kyle Cuff, Chance Westry, Elijah Moore, Jaquan Carlos, Eddie Lampkin, Naheem McLeod, Chris Bell, Donovan Freeman, Jair Davis, right? That's 10.
That's 10.
You have 13. Just because you have 13 doesn't mean you have to use all 13, right? But we're at that point where you don't want to put the proverbial square peg in the proverbial round hole here. If you can find a 2 or a 3, a player that can play both positions, a wing, great, that fits. If you can find a player that can give you some minutes at center if needed, but can also add a little forward depth, great. You don't want to force it, but there is a need there, Mike. I mean, right now, they could barely run a scrimmage in practice. There's 10 guys on the roster. So you don't have to go to 13, but are they looking to go above 10? I'll put it that way.
I think so. I think they're still looking out there. I think they're checking the portal. They'll be checking the portal with some of these guys that are withdrawing from the NBA draft.
Good point.
Maybe there's an option there. We'll see. Somebody might withdraw from the NBA draft and it's not a guy that Syracuse would get, but that kid could go to a different school where maybe somebody else in the portal was thinking about going and now is kind of like, oh, shoot, I'm not going to go there. I'm sort of available now. And Syracuse says, come here. I don't know if they're looking at anybody young, like not just from the class of 24, but maybe a class of 25 kid to reclassify. I think they would probably prefer to stay old. I mean, is there an international prospect? I don't know which way they'll go. Maybe there's somebody out there, but you have to be careful because with the portal, a lot of times the guys that take up that 12th and 13th scholarship, they're not happy. They're not playing. Mm-hmm. And rather than stick around and develop, they leave. They get unhappy and they end up taking off. We saw it with the Syracuse team last year. William Patterson, he redshirted his first year and now leaves in the portal. So do you keep all? I don't think you're going to see nearly as many teams have 13 players on scholarship anymore. I think maybe you'll have 11, maybe 12. And usually the 12th or 13th scholarship is probably going to go to a walk-on who's earned it. Maybe a senior walk-on, junior walk-on, someone who's been in your program, as a reward, and a thank you. You reward a kid like that, a scholarship. But you're right. A 10 is a little thin. You like you said, you can barely scrimmage 5-on-5 with all of your scholarship guys. If you get somebody just has a turned ankle or a class conflict, and you can't go 5-on-5 without putting a walk-on in there, it gets to be a problem. You get somebody with a longer-term injury, and now it's not just a class issue. Now it's like, oh, wait a second, who's our 7-man, 8-man rotation in tomorrow night's game? Because that happened last year, and
sure did. So you had the combination of injury and, of course, the Benny Williams situation where he was dismissed from the team during the season. They pushed the limit. Red Autry couldn't do what he wanted to do in terms of a deeper rotation and some of the things he discussed because he just didn't have the bodies to do it.
Westry was out from the beginning of the year.
Right.
You mentioned Benny. Naheem was gone after 14 games. Those were 3 guys that were probably in your top 9 entering the season, and all of a sudden you're down to the 6, and now you're bumping guys like, Peter Carey up a little higher, just to give yourself, that 7 or 8 man rotation.
So you want to go deeper if you can, but you made the best point of all. When you're getting to 11 and 12, there's not a lot of guys in the portal that are like, yeah, I want to be number 12, right? So you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul in that situation. All right, Mike, before we let you go, I got a couple of questions from our terrific Syracuse Sports Insiders. If you've been watching on YouTube, you can see at the bottom of your screen how to become a Syracuse Sports Insider, which means you can text me directly anytime your thoughts, questions, opinions on all matters of Syracuse sports. Brent's crystal ball projection, Sadiq White to Syracuse. You got that earlier today exclusively as a Syracuse Sports Insider, and lots of good insidery things. And again, direct access to me through text message. You can try free for 2 weeks. Just text the word orange to 315-847-3895. It's just $3.99 a month, less than $1 a week after that. Couple of questions for you, Mike, starting with Paul, who says, Mike indicated that Syracuse has 20 offers out there for the class of 2025. How does that compare to prior years? Is that more than usual, or is that kind of par for the course?
I think that 20 offers, I think we have a misunderstanding. I think if you look at like some places like verbal commits, you might see 20 kids that are offered. I think that number is dwindled and like they've cooled on some guys, or maybe some guys have eliminated Syracuse because it could cut both ways. I think right now, the article I wrote last week said basically that I have about 12 guys maybe actually on their board, active board right now. You know, some guys they've definitely cooled on, or, you know, realized they weren't going to get, so you move on. So yeah, that 20 would be way too big of a number. It's not unusual that you'll see schools with that many offers out at a time, but you got to remember some of these, you know, places, websites you'll go to, they don't remove guys. If either school or recruit have moved on in the process. That was part of the reason I wrote that article was last week, was sort of to reset the recruiting picture for Syracuse. And I think I really had it down to like 12 guys.
Mark B from San Diego, Mark, pardon me. I just wanted to acknowledge your question. Mike and I were just talking about this a minute ago, but he asked that very thing we were talking about, Mike, about the roster and can they get another wing? Can they get another stretch four or a center? So we answered that one. From TK, who says one of the most profound things that the new SU staff expressed to, and he mentions him, he's talking about Sadiq White here, all along, was that they want him to play open, his style, not the suffocating style of yesteryear. Agree, Mike? Was that a message that the coaching staff had out there from what you know about? I think they want to play that way generally. We've heard Autry say that, right? And you're fitting the puzzle pieces in where they go. But that is encouraging. That's the style they want to play, and those are the players that they're pursuing.
I think they want to play more up tempo, maybe a little bit more than in the past. And part of that is not just offense, because, you know, I think, you know, Jim Boeheim always liked to play tempo as well offensively. It got harder in recent years, though, when you're playing a 2-3 zone. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the biggest change we've seen with Red. We've seen him. He will play zone at times when it suits him, when he needs to. But, you know, playing man-to-man sort of just makes you feel like you're playing up tempo from both ends of the floor. But, you know, we'll see more, I think, more of Red's hand in the offense in year two, you know, as he gets a chance to construct the roster with guys. And, you know, it's always going to be different. Some years you're going to have a Judah Mintz at the point, and he's that certain kind of point guard. He's going to be driving a lot and stuff like that. This coming year at Jaquan Carlos, if he ends up being the starter at the point, he's a pass first guy, averaged over 6 assists a game at Hofstra. And you're going to be emphasizing a low post game, which you couldn't do last year. So I don't know if Red has one set offensive style, or a lot of it is you play to the strengths of the players that you have.
And one last question here, more of a comment, Mike, from Mahir, who says, just one question. What do you say to a fan like myself that hasn't exactly been impressed with Donnie Freeman so far? I've watched him play a few times and haven't been convinced that he's all that good, and how he's been made out to be in the media. What I would say to that is, look, sometimes recruits don't pan out. It does happen, but I like my chances with Donnie Freeman. From what I've seen of the player he is now, he keeps growing. Mike had him on the Inside Syracuse Basketball podcast recently, so make sure you go check that out and discuss that he has grown recently. His game is growing. We mentioned he's the highest rated recruit since the birthday boy, Carmelo Anthony. I'm sorry, I said it again. I watch Donnie Freeman, and I can't help but think, not the player he is, Mike, but the player he's going to be. Now, the trick is, do you have him for a year, right?
Or two.
Or maybe two. Maybe you could be pushing two. Here, I would say this. You have the right to your opinion, but I like my chances with Donnie Freeman. I think he's going to be an elite talent. And I think a year from now, come back to us and see if you still have the same opinion, because I have a feeling we're going to be talking about whether or not he's going to pull his name out of the NBA draft or not, because that is a first round talent and prospect that is going to get a serious look from the league this time next year.
I'll give Mahir a little bit of a nod though, because I've also watched Donnie play several times, and I've seen him have some good games, but I've also seen him have games that, maybe some of the ones that Mahir said, like, oh, geez, man, I don't know, 7 points. Are you? But again, you remind yourself, Donnie was playing a year up when I saw him play that game. He was playing older guys that game, or this game wasn't suited for him. I have had a few people say, listen, don't expect too much for him. Don't over, rate him either, because, he might be more of like what we saw out of Chris McCullough, a similarly rated, slender power forward sort of guy who could shoot the ball. And if you go back and look at Chris's numbers through those first 14 or 16 games before he got hurt that back in 2015, they were modest. They were about 9 or 10 points and about 7 rebounds a game. Now, here's the thing, though. If Donnie Freeman is able to give you 9, 10 points and 6, 7 rebounds a game, but you're getting double-figure scoring from Chris Bell, J.J. Starling, and Eddie Lampkin, still going to be okay with that, I think. It'll be that's fine. And on occasion, maybe Donnie has a game where he's open for a few threes, draws a few fouls, gets in there, and he gives you an 18-point game. I'm not sure. We shall see. But, yeah, I think it's always good to, take things with caution. The other thing, it sounds like Mahir might have seen Donnie more than once or twice. But I always tell people, listen, you got to make sure you see him more than once. I saw Chris Bell one time in high school, and I even kid around with his dad about this. I don't think I've ever told Chris this, but I did tell his dad. Chris was horrible. I think he had the worst game of his entire senior year in high school the day I was in the gym. And I was sitting there going, I don't get it.
What's going on here?
I don't get it. What's going on?
But even top recruits have bad days. Yep.
He was like 0 of 5 from 3. He made like 2 buckets inside. He didn't defend. And I was like, really? But I went back to the SU coaches and I said, what did I miss? And they said, you got to see him more than once. You got to go back out. You got to make sure you see guys. And sure enough, we're talking about a guy that, Chris Bell might have struggled at times as a freshman, but let's remember, he had a pretty good sophomore year.
Mahir, I'll say this to close. If Donnie Freeman a year from now is not in that conversation as a first-round talent, then you come find me at the Dome, and we'll go to the concession stand, and you pick the food item of your choice and a beverage of your choice, and it's on me. How about that? There you go. I don't think it's going to be an issue, but fair point. Fair points by all.
You're expensing it. I know you.
Don't tell anybody, Mike. Well, that was fun. And as I said at the beginning, and I'll close with the thought as well, it's always basketball season, no matter if you're in Syracuse, New York, or just a fan of Syracuse basketball. Sadiq White, 5-star prospect, top 30 player, 6'8" forward from Charlotte, North Carolina, commits to Syracuse for the class of 2025. Thanks to Mike Waters for all his great insight. As always, look for more coverage on syracuse.com. Thanks to all you guys for watching and listening tonight. A big thank you to our Syracuse Sports Insiders for your terrific insight and questions, as always. This has been Syracuse Sports. We'll catch you next time, guys. Thanks for hanging.